Up to 5,800 civilians may have been killed by Iraqi and US-led coalition forces in the last 4 months during the battle for Mosul. That's the latest estimate from human rights organization Amnesty International. In its new report, the group says pro-government forces relied upon imprecise weapons during the liberation of West Mosul and ignored the growing number of civilian deaths. It also claims pro-Baghdad troops appear to have repeatedly violated international humanitarian law, something that may amount to war crimes. Amnesty International collected the testimonies from those displaced. It says over 600,000 people were forced to flee West Mosul. Now, the horrors of war were also witnessed in another way by artist and illustrator George Butler, who was embedded with Iraqi forces in the area. Previously, he's worked in Syria, where he travelled several times to document the conflict. This time, he depicted those who were displaced from West Mosul. The media, though, has largely praised coalition efforts to liberate Mosul. We spoke to George Butler about what he witnessed during his latest Mosul trip.
And what was your first impressions when you arrived and became embedded with the Iraqi Special Forces?
What I found, I guess, was huge disruption to the civilian life, and as ever, it's the civilians that are losing out more than anybody, and they're the ones with the stories, and they're the ones that I, as an illustrator and as an artist, I guess, are trying to do to give justice to. What
was the most difficult or most striking thing that you saw? There's something that really made an impression on you. On one side, a pile of endless piles of rubble. These houses have been destroyed in an airstrike, and this man, Abdul Hamid, came out and bought me a chair to sit on because he could see I was drawing, and just begins to tell his story. And some ISIS fighters had fled the mosque next door during the fight, a firefight. They'd come into his home where his family were living, and then the Iraqi army had called in an airstrike, which it so often does in West Mosul, of course killing Daesh, but also killing his mother, 2 of his brothers, and 1 of their wives. This attack actually happened on the same day that there was an infamous attack where 160 people were killed in Mosul. You know, the willingness to talk about it and the openness and the normality of it was perhaps the most extraordinary thing, and that is the fact that is so regular, I guess, was the difficult thing to accept. You were obviously fortunate to capture this in your drawing, but is this something that really occurred all over the city? A lot of the damage that you see is not done by car bombs or firefights, but by airstrike. That story of civilians being caught up in that is, it's obviously very sad, but it is happening in Mosul over the last few months. I just want to ask you on the point of the refugee camp as well. You made one painting in the Halil al-Alil. You painted a man who recently suffered a heart attack. He's called Suleiman. He's born just after the Second World War, suffered a heart attack 5 days earlier, and was now lying in this tent outside the main refugee camp. So abhorrent conditions, the heat alone was, and his wife, you can imagine the desperation. He hasn't eaten for 5 days or drunk, and it's a very private moment. This man may well be dying, may well be dead by now, but you're inviting strangers into your tent for those last moments on the off chance that they can help. That for me was very difficult to sort of, you've got to make a really difficult choice whether you engage with that and tell the story or whether you stand off from it, because of course the chance of helping is I think very slim. The one memory you will take away from your time in Mosul, the one impression that really will stay with you? I think it's always this. Well, I suppose it's always been the same, and that is that it is the majority of civilians losing out hugely to something that they have no control over, and the lack of just that kind of very vulnerable moment and the lack of choice, and the thing that I guess always sticks with me is that the drawings that I'm doing are done with their permission. The best drawings that I did were the ones that I was very much emotionally attached to, the kind of desire to draw, to do justice and to draw exactly what was in front of me.